Everybody.
Yassi,
I'm listening.
I'm talking about going to the... Nah, it's silly. Go ahead. I'm muting myself. It's about time.
I thought you were going to say something important.
No, it's silly. I'm not going to say anything.
Is anything you say ever silly?
Where is everybody?
They're bored. They had enough. You have a live shear, you have an electronic shear, and then you have Eil Dvarim Shesh Lem shear. Okay. Here we go. It's Chelik Lamed Beis. It's a short Sicha. It's an interesting Sicha. Akuchinke.
Let me tell everybody. Get on.
Okay. Okay, this is a Lag Ba'emer Sicha, okay? It's a Lag Ba'emer Sicha. Now, you'll notice in the footnotes, the Rebbe is mitzayin to Sicha in Chelik Zayin, page 342, and then of course the famous Sicha in Chelik Beis, footnote 8, page 139. This is the famous Sicha about Nagu, Loi Nagu Chavetz B'Zeh. The Rebbe is going to repeat the Nekuda of the Vort of Loi Nagu Chavetz B'Zeh, and the Rebbe is going to very push a great Chiddush to the ganze Maaseh. It's really a nigla sicha more than it's a musa sicha. Here we go. Yadua sipar Gemara. We all know the Gemara. Shneim esrei zugim talmidim hayu leil Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva had shneim esrei zugim means 12,000 pairs. 12,000 pair means 24,000 talmidim, because a pair is 2. Right, so 12,000 pairs, 24,000 members. Okay, 1 second. Okay, so Rabbi Akiva has 24,000 Talmidim. V'kulon meisu b'perek echad. They died in a very, very short period of time, in a few weeks. Right? The Gemara says ben Pesach la'atzeres, and of course you all know it came up tonight in the class in yeshiva that it's not the whole Sfiras ha'omer. Api halacha, the Avelos of Talmid Rabbi Akiva is Lamed Beis Yomim. It's 32 days. There's different minhagim. Some people count the Lamed Beis Yomim from Pesach till Lag B'Omer. Some people count from the second day of Iyar till Shloshis Mei Agbola. And halachically, you could pick. You can do either this day or this day. Okay? But the bottom line is, 24,000 men died in less than 5 weeks. They didn't have sufficient respect to one another. Or of course, Lag B'Omer, they stopped to die. This question deserves our attention. Why? Davar Pasha, to itself understood. Shekol Talmidim Eilu, B'ribi Godel Shechavdal Elf. There's 24,000 students. First of all, Leibo V'nasu Talmida V'yem B'perek Echad. Rabbi Akiva did not collect 24,000 students in a day. It took years. Over the course of many years, of many decades, Rabbi Akiva collected till 24,000 Talmidim. When Rabbi Akiva began to teach, and his name and his Torah was disseminated by of the world, his chilul linheaded of Talmidim, people began to run to learn by Rabbi Akiva, and of course, as time passed, the number grew, 24,000 Talmidim. So first of all, it's impossible to say that all these 24,000 Talmidim were Talmidim for the same duration. Some were Talmidim for longer, some were Talmidim for shorter, and so forth. Number 2, it's also understood that the way, the behavior of these students didn't change in an instant, that they began to disrespect each other, happened gradually. In other words, there was a problem with derech eretz between one another, right? Between mutual respect. That happened over time. So, the way the Talmidim came to Rabbi Akiva, and the way the Talmidim began to interact with one another, it certainly had a lot of variables. It wasn't black and white. Everybody was the same amount of time by Rabbi Akiva. Everyone was in the same condition of lei nagu covered throughout, and so on. And therefore, to Mobi Yesa with the Gavaldika Kashe, If some of them were Rabbi Akiva longer, and some of them were Rabbi Akiva shorter, if some of them had a greater issue with covet, and others of them had a lesser issue with covet, why would it happen that they would all get punished and all be killed at the same time? This is the kash. It's very difficult to say in this very short period of time, which has been Pesach Latzeres, the few weeks between Pesach and Shavuos, the measure of sin was filled. Shall kol chov dal elf talmidim bebesachas, of all 24,000 talmidim at once. V'ad kedei kach le'onish beinish misa should be punished by death. It says it doesn't make common sense. If people died because they did an avera, they couldn't have all been equal in the avera. And if they could not have been equal in the avera, it's impossible to say that you all die in such a short period of time. That says it doesn't add up. It just doesn't make common sense. So many people should commit the same sin in the same way, on the same level, at the same time, and suffer the same consequences. It doesn't sound believable. That's Rabbi Akiva's kash. It's a gewaldige kash. So the Rebbe adds a chiddush. Rabbi Akiva's Talmidim did not only die because of Leinu Kovet that was there. There's another factor besides for the Leinu Kovet, which is responsible for the Talmidim died, and that happened at that moment. Which is the real reason they died. In other words, the Rebbe is saying there's a missing component to the story. To say that they all passed away in 5 weeks because of the Talmidim Rabbi Akiva, Leinu Kovet, there's something missing here. Sif Beis. V'yesh loymar, give me a second. V'yesh loymar, says the Heilige Rebbe. We're in 770, Reuven. If you're in 770, why can't you fill it up at least? If I was a lady kishol. You like empty. Yisrael u'malka b'chaydeis. You and the Rebbe alone. Okay. You're not, I can't hear you. I can't hear you. You have to unmute yourself, my friend. You're still muted. Oh, I know what's wrong. Okay, my computer. Say it again. Now I'll hear you. You have to unmute
in a minute if you want. I'll show you something better.
Okay, very good. Oh, I know what's wrong. Okay, my computer. Okay, I'm going on. V'yashleim, a sif base. V'yashleim bazestem. I want to answer the question. V'hegdim biur. But I want to preface first, Klalis ha'inyan, the idea that we already know from other places, shetalmid Rabbi Akiva le'nog, that this whole idea that Talmid Rabbi Akiva had a problem with the inyan of le'nog, of course, is very difficult to understand. Hare, Rabam shal Talmid Yehidu was Rabbi Akiva. Who was there Rabbi Akiva? And who had Tana? He was the Tana. Shehid Yeshes Gedo. Haflos. Halmailish Avos Yisrael. He brought out the great wonder of the level of the Inyan of Avos Afterecha Kamoicho. Rabbi Akiva Emezekal Godel B'Teira. Rabbi Akiva was the one who said, Zekal Godel B'Teira. Vim Kain Yipolid. The question is therefore very strange. Mo'id. Shedavke Talmid Dov. Of all people. The Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva lay no Kovet Zebazar. An issue with Kovet Zelazah, which is Heipecha Inyan the Avos Yisrael, the exact opposite of loving a fellow Jew, which was Heira Ikris V'Yasedis B'Teiras Rabba. Their Rebbe had sich gekocht an Avos Yisrael, and they couldn't seem to get along. This is the kash, but this is an old kasha. The Rebbe asked this kasha in other sichas. V'nizbayir b'mokamacher, the answers in different sichas. Sha'ad Rabba, it's the opposite. Davke Heyeson Talmid Rabbi Akiva. It's because they were the students of Rabbi Akiva. Godam lakach, it caused that they had a lack of derech favos, because they were passionate people and they were principled people. If you're not passionate and you're not principled, you can love everybody. If you're passionate and you're principled, you have principles, you have issues. Omru Chazal, it says in the Gemara, ein deisayim shabnei adam shabbos. No two people think alike. U'kamuv, and Alter brings it in Tanya in the Akdama, shekeinu b'negei l'chadal elef Talmid Rabbi Akiva. Certainly, the personalities of these 24,000 Talmidim were disparate. Were different from one another. In other words, each one of them, his sectarius Rabbi Akiva, understood the words of their Rebbe Rabbi Akiva, lefi darkei v'daitei, in his way and his knowledge, his understanding. Ubeshikal hadas shalei, in the way he judged, the way he assessed ideas, maskanose, his conclusions, shabavada, that it's certain that kefi shehisik hu, the way he understands. Turn to page 150. Kainu apira shramiti, but that's the truth. So each one of them had their own brain. Each one of them heard what Rabbi Akiva said. Each one assessed, thought over what Rabbi Akiva said and meant, and each one of them concluded that the way they understood it is correct. Accordingly, kasher shama shachaveirei leimid is divrei Rava efen sheni. He found out, very good, Rabbi, when he heard that his friend had a different opinion about how Rabbi Akiva teaches, what Rabbi Akiva means. Ubilti nachem, which is of course wrong, Lifidaiti in his opinion. He couldn't honor him. He couldn't show him value, worth, respect. He's misunderstanding what the Rebbe said. So Rabbi Akiva spoke. 24,000 people heard and understood it in 24,000 different ways. And each one was certain that their way is correct. Knew if their way is correct, the other guy's way is incorrect. If the other guy's way is incorrect, you have to make a macha. Right? Anumochim. Verstehst? And to think that they would be, Californish, yeah? Nobody's from California, so we'll make fun of Californians. That they would treat each other outwardly with respect. And on the inside, they don't respect each other. Says the Heilige Rebbe, moving itself understood, Rabbi Akiva's Talmidim did not have the capacity for bluff. There certainly were people of truth. And what was on the inside was also on the outside. But often they could not behave in such a fashion of echad bepeh echad belev, that their heart and their mouth should be in different places. So the Rebbe says they couldn't bluff. That's the word, right? They couldn't bluff that they loved each other. Where do you have in Chumash? They couldn't bluff that they love each other. It was considered a mailer, Rashi says. You remember? By my sound is off. By the Shvatim. That they love each other was considered a mailer, Rashi says. I got. Remember? Hold on 1 minute. Let me find my. Okay, now you can talk to me. Where is it?
The Shvatim,
right. What does Rashi say? It's that it's the shevach of the Shvatim that they couldn't bluff. It's considered the praise of the Shvatim that they couldn't bluff and act like they like Yosef even though they didn't like. It's because they were his disciples. He has seen, but this is the real reason. That they couldn't respect each other. Because each of Rabbi Akiva, so every time it says Rabbi Akiva in the Sicha, supplement Rebbe, or if you really want, you can supplement Rebbe Melech HaMashiach. It's exactly the same story. Yeah? Each one of the Talmidim of the Rebbe, he has Siba, this is the reason. They couldn't respect one another. Because each one of the Rebbe's Talmidim, Haya Moser of Nasan, is totally dedicated, with his whole soul, to the Rebbe's teachings. He couldn't tolerate that anybody should interpret the Torah of the Rebbe incorrectly in his opinion. Or specifically, he's a god of Lubavitcher. He's a Lubavitcher, lives in Crown Heights, he goes to all the Fabrengens, and he's misunderstanding the Rebbe, darf them klappen in Kopf. Then certainly they couldn't show each other respect. You say to me that, continues the Rebbe, moreover, this way that Rabbi Akiva's Talmidim were so passionate about the words of their Rebbe, and if someone made a mistake, they couldn't act outwardly kind, they had to protest. And therefore there was in the Yesh but Tekiv Dafke. It has a special power. Mitzad Heira Osei HaYeseides Hanal Shor Rabbi Akiva Fakert. Part of the reason there was loy nogu kovetz abezeh was because Rabbi Akiva had gekocht in Navas Yisrael. That since Rabbi Akiva Omar v'haf l'reichel kamoicha zeh klal gadol b'Torah, since Rabbi Akiva was the one who said that. Lulei razu, if not for Rabbi Akiva saying v'haf l'reichel kamoicha yitachin, it's possible. Shelo yihye lahem ichpas lahem kol kach, it wouldn't bother them so much. Mashiyesh Talmud, that is one student, she'eni masik b'teiras Rabna mitasa, doesn't understand what the Rebbe is saying be'emes. Ava Mekiv and Rabbi Kiva Rabba. Since the Rabbi Kiva limned them of our mouth, Kiva and Chamoicha, there Rebbe was the one to Mavis Yisrael. So Bemeh they have no choice. Le'yistapku bazeh, it wasn't enough. Shehem Atz, from the day themselves, Shoktu v'osu chayil. They learned diligently and they were successful. B'lim Teiras Rabba, the learning of the Torah of their Rebbe. Each one of them hishtadal hashpiyah al kol shebegeder echad. Right, each one had to be mashpiyah. And the next guy. Or befrat Talmid Rabbi Akiva, that's the Talmid of the Rebbe. Shegam heim yasigu Teiras Rabban be'esa aderech ha'amitis lefi daite, that the other guy should understand the same way they do, because this, of course, is correct. And meila ve'elo shalei kiblu. Zeh, anybody did not accept their version. Lo yachol linig behem kavod, they couldn't show them respect. Or befrat kavod kfi shadash ben Akiva. He says, what's the word? Talmid Rabbi Akiva were very loyal to Rabbi Akiva's teachings. Rabbi Akiva's Talmidim also felt that they have to practice, what's the right word? Proselytizing. Shlichus. You have to bring other people to agree with them and Divrei Rabbim. Who are the first people you're going to proselytize about? Nachal Lubavitcher. Somebody else was rechen sich dem Rebbe Samensch. For sure he has to know what the Rebbe thinks. He thinks differently than me, so I have to teach him. So the fact that Rabbi Akiva was the one who talked about Avos Yisrael actually compounded. It made it more difficult. The Leino covers Rebbe. I mean, this the Rebbe explained in the other Sicha, but the Rebbe, it almost sounds like the Rebbe is being sarcastic, you know? It's so extreme, it almost seems like the Rebbe is being sarcastic. We're saying, no, if you're, you could just think about us. You're a Lubavitch, and you care about Divrei Harav, and someone comes along and says what you think is wrong, you're not just going to say, okay, he disagrees with me, you're going to argue with him. And if the argument isn't resolved, you're going to pound away, you're going to push to change his opinion. And Davke, because the Rebbe said you have to be Makar of the other guy, this will encourage a greater lay no cover to there because you love him. I heard once that the Rebbe spoke to him, there has to be Shalom and Lubavitch. So he said publicly, he says, Es gießen Blut, aber es sein Shalom and Lubavitch. We'll spill blood, but we'll have Shalom and Lubavitch. The Rebbe said he wanted this to be no machlekes. He said, we'll spill blood, gießen Blut, it has to be Shalom. I said, gießen Blut, it has to be Shalom and Lubavitch. This is mamish what Rabbi Akiva's Talmidim was thinking. Shalom Aleichem Rabbi Cheskel. Huh?
That's a jigan. A jigan line.
Is that really? Okay, they say it about somebody else.
Yeah.
But you, Chazi, I want you to know, maybe it's the camera, but you certainly look wiser than you did 2 months ago.
Whiter. We're all getting whiter.
I said wiser.
I know what you said. I know what I said.
You're not supposed to get the hint. Okay.
That's fairly so.
The Irke ist, du sollst sein gesund und stark und leben lang.
Rabbi Yosef,
Yes, sir.
I don't get this 24,000 thing. What was the Metzias here? Was the Metzias that there were 24,000 different opinions, or there are etliche opinions that were shared amongst the 24,000?
I'll tell you this.
Lamer Zogin, that there's infinite opinions, Lamaila. But Mitzad Seichel Adam, I don't think we could handle 24,000 opinions.
Right.
So how did this whole thing work for Pashtus?
I think, first of all, your point is well taken. Even if there were 5, that's 5 teams right there.
Right,
That's 4,800 on each team, there's war.
Yeah.
But you could say something different. That they didn't just argue about this one Torah. Rabbi Akiva taught hundreds and hundreds of Torahs. So you could make a case that there were not 24,000 shittas about Avos Yisrael. But if you take all the Torahs of Rabbi Akiva and all the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva, you could say that everybody had a reason to dislike everybody else. At least one. They had many reasons to like him, because when they agreed, they had to work together up to the Shlogen Yenim. But if you take the word that Rabbi Akiva's Talmidim, because of Avos Yisrael, had to win over everybody to their shita in every India. Rabbi Akiva said thousands of Torahs. You know what I'm saying? So they found enough areas where I always tell people the biggest brach in Lubavitch is more machlekes. Why? Because the machlekes get so messy, you don't know what team you're on. I'm on Reuven's team, the machlekes with the Rabbanim. I'm on Shimon's team, machlekes with the Kashas. I'm on Levi's team, the Yechid. I'm on Yehuda's team when it comes to the oil. I'm on Yisachar's team when it comes to Eretz Yisrael. And the Vulin's team when it comes to Shabbat Mitzvahs. And when you add up all the people you have to keep track on, either you hate every single person on the planet, or say, you know what, it's too complicated, I might as well be nice to everybody. That's how I feel. That's pushing how I feel. The machlekes in the Babich is getting so bad that you don't even know there's so many teams about so many different issues. So it makes it easier. That's how I feel. I feel. Anyway, Cholef, Gimel. It's Chelik Lamed Beis, page 150, okay? Since we understand that Dafka, the passion, as Talmidei Rabbi Akiva brought on this extreme of machlekes, we understand on the other hand, even though we understand, it's wrong. Obviously they were making a mistake. Is notwithstanding their different opinion, it should not have affected a lack of respect of their relationships. They were wrong. Because, of course, the right thing to do was they should have left space for the other guy's opinion. I was once arguing with somebody. I mean, I have a whole history of arguing. I got older, I think I learned how to argue less. When I was younger, I argued everything about everybody. So I was in an argument with a guy, and I was already past the prime of my arguing career.
You're still young.
Huh?
You're still young.
What does that mean?
You still like to argue.
I can still argue. No, I don't like to argue. I really don't.
Yeah.
So, at least I say it. I don't like to argue. So the guy says to me, is there even a remote possibility that you're wrong? Is there even a remote possibility? I said, of course. Of course there's a remote possibility. But there's also a remote possibility that I'm right. And the guy didn't know what to do with that. Because that's the Metzias. So how can you argue? I could be right, you could be right. So, you could leave space for the other guy. Rabbi Akiva's Talmidim couldn't do this. Okay. Mikivan shegamzu hideya b'teira elu ve'elu dvarim elikim chdiver elikim chaim. All opinions are placed in Torah. They should have respected each other. Lochein, therefore, Hanagas Amahavchis, they're acting to the contrary. Nech Shabaladava Biltiroti is considered a bad thing. Ubefrat Leverach Malosam, considering their Madrega, the ultimate Rabbi Akiva. Therefore, it's understood that they made a mistake. Says the Rebbe Vekoma after Kasha Vaited. Eich Yitachin Leimer, how can you say Shebiglal Chet Kazeh Lechud? Because of such an Avera alone, does it make sense that if people don't respect each other, they should chas v'shalom all die? In 5 weeks, 24 seconds. It seems like everybody in this house is on a computer screaming at a screen, so we have to make mechitzas so we shouldn't hear each other's screams. Yeah? Does it make sense that people don't have derech eretz for each other? Ezra, you have to put yourself on mute. Okay. Does it make sense that people should die because they know covered zebazeh? Doesn't say they killed each other. Doesn't say they stole money from each other. It said they didn't have respect. 24,000 people should die in 5 weeks because they know covered zebazeh. Doesn't make any sense. Or befrat, particularly. Now move on. That based on the way I, says the Rebbe, explain to you what was the head that I covered based on. They were not street people who were disrespecting each other for the fun of it. And certainly that they had a lack of love. They didn't feel in their heart a full sentiment of respect for the other person, which would have been fit to be Rabbi Akiva. Specifically, what was it that was causing the Hepech HaKavod? In different interpretations of Torah. We were promised in the Gemara in Kiddushin. It's like a famous Gemara. In the beginning, the Talmidei Chacham argue, we hate each other. Before they have a chance to move, they begin to love each other, like it says in the Pasuk. The Rebbe says it doesn't make sense. 24,000 people should die in 5 weeks for what? What was the Aveda? Lay Nagu covered Zebezeh warrants this. V'yashleima, and now the Rebbe gives a teretz. Now understand, in the other Sicha in Chelik Chav Beis, the Sicha ends right here. Right? The Sicha in Chelik Chav Beis, which is also a short Sicha, but that Sicha we learned, and I didn't want to learn it over because I knew that Reuven is going to know that we learned it, and if you make me look bad, and I don't like looking bad, so B'meila I decided not to teach it, to learn it. Yeah, the Rebbe, the word of that other Sicha in Chelik Chav Beis, it finishes here. The Lei Nagu Kavod Zebazeh was in the Inyan of Yehafta Recha Kamaych. But the Rebbe is asking a different kasha. Fine, I understand their crime, but I don't understand their punishment. You killed 24,000 people in 5 weeks for this? So the Rebbe gives a teretz. And what follows now is richtig and nigle. It's emesim, it's nagdish atayde. I'm talking of Rebbe Mazazach, but this a Litva could say. V'yashleima the teretz is, Chizau shadiku razal shkula meisa v'pedek echad. That their death is associated with pedek echad. What is the meaning of the word pedek? Pedek means a section, like you have joints on a finger, yeah? Every finger has 3 joints. This is a pedek, and this is a pedek, and this is a pedek. Pedek means a unit. A unit of time, or a unit of something. And the death didn't happen in 5 weeks, it happened in pedek echad. It was a unit of time which brought on the death of ultimately Rabbi Akiva. The Gemara is meramis with this word pedek echad. The zeh shekulan meisu, that the fact that they all died, lo yehoye rak, machmas chetam hanal. They did not die only because leinogu kavod zebazeh. It doesn't make any sense. Elagam kiteitzah me'inyan hamiyuchad shebepedek zeh. Something happened during that unit of time, which was an additional aspect. And when you join that additional aspect with the leinogu kavod zebazeh, hazman goram save lemisasam. The time caused them to die. So the Rebbe is saying there's more than one cause. There's more than one cause. They didn't just die because that doesn't make any sense. That time, compounded by the no brought this up. And the Rebbe explains. It says, hey, look at Rebbe, Sif Dalet, page 151. Look at the Sichas Chelik on page 151. Yuva, that the Pshata, that Bimash Matzinu, AIDS, Fever, the Rezal, by Move, Loshan Zeh, Kulon, Mesa, Pedek Echad. The Rebbe takes a quick journey in his super computer through the whole Teda, and he finds this expression, Pedek Echad, B'negei Tezman, in one other place in Shas. Where is it? It's a Yerushalmi. Everybody knows Yerushalmi. Yeah? Kulon Meitze Pedek Echad is a Yerushalmi. Isa be Yerushalmi in Sanhedrin. Maise be'esim ve'arba kroyes kreines shel beis Rebbe. There were 24 wagons of the house of Rebbe. Okay? Shenichnesu la'abe shona belud. They went into Lud to add an extra month to the year. V'nichneshem ayin ra, and an evil eye went into them. V'kmeisu kulam be'pedek echad. The same words, pedek echad. They all died at the same time. So chav dalat kroyes kreines means a bunch of Kreis means cities, but the Pnei Moshe says kreines. A bunch of people. I don't know how Kreis adds up to people. Kreis means like Kiryas. Yeah, Kiryas. When you say Kiryas, what do you think of? Kiryas Melech Rav, Yerushalayim, yeah? 24 cities of people.
It's Kroi nice, no?
Kroi nice means wagons.
Wagons, right?
But that doesn't make any sense. There be 24 wagons.
24 wagons of his family.
Kroyos makes more sense.
Why Kroyos?
Kroyos means villages.
24 wagons of his family.
It doesn't. Where does it? A base that means mishpacha. Kroyos means villages.
I know what Kroyos
like
means.
Kiryas Sefer.
Right, but here it's his family.
In the Pnei Moshe.
The caravan of his family went in.
Okay, fine. But the lashon is bepedek echad. V'hine. V'mayim echazel zeh and this Yerushalmi nispal shasi ba'yechid lemisasam. Over there it doesn't say that they committed a crime. It just said that they died. Right? What was their aveda? There's no aveda. It says he mitnei shenis asfu harbe talmidim. Because so many talmidim gathered together, Chavdal came to 24 kreines. Listen to this. The Gemara does not say they did an aveda. The Gemara simply says there was an ayin hara. What was the reason of ayin hara? Because there's so many. I heard once from Rabbi Reuben, Zechein Levracha, my rabbi from the police station, that the Divrei Chaim, the Tanzan, had many children. 13, 14. He had a ton of kids. He was married 4 times. The Divrei Chaim was, his yartzeit was gathered right after Pesach in Nisan. The Divrei Chaim was a cripple. He was disfigured. He was mangled. He was ugly, Pashat, Begashmes. And he was a little boy. he was sitting on his mother's lap, 3-4 years old, and his mother's crying, and she says, "Oy Chamel, wer wird dich wählen, wer wird dich nehmen? Chamel, you're so disfigured, who's going to want you, who's going to marry you?" So he says to his mother, "Mamach, listen to this. Chamachos gelernt chochmas hayad. I taught myself how to read palms. Ein Frau will ich haben, 4 Frauen will ich haben. You think I'm not going to get married? I'm going to get married 4 times. Und kach have." He pushed it. He didn't have any. He pushed his wife died. He lived. The Tzad lived almost till 90. He passed away. Tov Reish Lamed Zayin. Tov Reish Lamed Zayin is 1877. Most of his co-generationalists passed away at least 10 years before him. He had more than the Garichas Yom, and he had tons of children from all of these different wives. So I heard from Rabbi Reuben that the Divrei Chai made a gzeira that his mishpacha is never ever allowed to gather in one place. They couldn't all visit Tzant at the same time. They had to take turns. There was a rotation. He was poshut worried about Ayin Hara. And here you have a Gemara, a Yerushalmi, that says that Rebbe's Kinderlach, it says here Talmidim, haben sich zusammengeklebt, and they died because of Ayin Hara. And the diuk is Perek Echad. V'yashleima, continues the Rebbe. Shemizen nilmid binyaneinu. We're going to learn from that Yerushalmi, the pshat of this Gemara in Yevomis, when they get to Rabbi Akiva's Talmidim. Shenemar bei Eitze Haloshen. It says the same exact expression from Mesubah. Kulan, Meis, Perek Echad, they all died in the same Perek. Says the Rebbe, Shesibas, Misas, Talmidei Rabbi Akiva, Perek Echad. The reason all of Rabbi Akiva's Talmidim died in Perek Echad, it wasn't only the Leinogo Koved Zeh V'Zeh, Hoysam Teisha Perek Zeh Higia Mispar B'Chabdal Dalef. But I say Perek means when he had 24,000 Talmidim. Before that, he had 23,000, 22,000. Oisei Perek means, to use a physics term, when Rabbi Akiva's yeshiva reached critical mass, 12,000 pairs, 24,000. In other words, it was a status that the Talmid yeshiva was this big. And Oisei Perek is a reference to the number of Talmidim. Now notice the similarities of numbers. The Yerushalmi says 24 kroines. We don't know how much a koren is, but the number 24 is apparently significant. 12,000 pairs is 24,000 Talmidim. The Oisei Perek is when Rabbi Akiva's student body reaches 24, it's called, what's it called? Misper Godel B'Yesef. Just like when Rebbe's family gathers in 24, it's a Misper Godel B'Yesef. Ubazeh Guf of Misper Shel Chav Dalet. It's connected to the number 24, and the Rebbe says, HaKosher Midas Hadin. We find in Chazal that 24 is connected to judgment. There's in says the Rebbe, there's 2 parts. Number 1, that you have Perek Echad because of Ayin Hara, and number 2, the number Chav Dalet. Says the Rebbe, Shezeh Goram, this was the cause. That's because the Ayin Hara, they all died. So when you ask the question, why would people die for lack of kavod? And the answer is they didn't die because of lack of kavod. They became vulnerable to Ayin Hara because of lack of kavod. And Ayin Hara killed them. That's the word of the Rebbe. Does not contradict what says in the Gemara in Bavli. By the way, I just was getting a reminder for Kiddush Levana. If you didn't do Kiddush Levana, do it tonight. Shemei, so they died. There was a lack of respect for one another. Says the Rebbe, there were 2 causes, and they joined together. The behavioral cause was and the how do I say it? The passive cause, the symptomatic cause, was a magefa, an Ayin Hara. I can't hear you.
What was the Ayin Hara? Anything in particular?
Yeah, that there were so many of them.
It wasn't like someone gave an Ayin Hara.
Ayin Hara means somebody gave it. But why did he give it today, not yesterday? Because today he saw Rabbi Akiva's yeshiva having 24,000 Talmidim, and he was jealous.
Ayin Hara is not a intentional thing necessarily.
Also true. My grandmother, Allah Shalom, told me, my mother's mother, that when she was growing up in America, there was a man that everybody knew, that he came into a house and he cursed it. He was so jealous. he would just walk in and he'd be so fachman. Whatever you had made him upset. Because he was jealous, and then things would happen. Things would happen. So people, Pashut, would not let them into his home. Even more, this man's wife was a tzadekis. And when he told her that he's going to visit his house, she would call up the person saying, my husband's coming, lock the door. He Pashut, he was a, what's the word? A beacon of ayin hara. Wherever he went, he left an evil eye. Anyway, does give an amaise. So the Rebbe is saying that there is an aspect of the story of Rabbi Akiva's Talmidim's death. It makes it more reasonable, but it also softens their aveda, right? Says the Rebbe, the fact that they lacked respect for one another by itself, ein nechet godel kol kach, is not a sufficiently severe sin. Sheyanshu, Shalom Aleichem Ezra, by the way. Sheyanshu avure levad be'enesh mitzah kanal. There's no way to say the 24,000 people should die because there was a lack of covet. Not there was sin, a lack of covet. Turn the page, 152. Says the Rebbe was a combination. It was a certain moment. And the Rebbe is saying that the Pedic was when they reached critical mass, so to speak, of 24,000 Talmidim. Nichnese b'aim hora, an evil eye went into them. So b'meile nenshu oz gam al chet kal, zeh, they were punished for ultimately as a much lighter sin, shalei nogu kavod zelazeh, because of ayin hora. So lepeil, there was another factor. There was an ayin hora, but the ayin hora, so to speak, worsened the way they would judge for the no kavod zabel. Ule Hashem says that about one not even more. Shal zal derech shamatzinu beidna derischa. Right, that the Gemara speaks about a person who's very passionate. That manishim gamal heder haradifach akim mitzvah tzitzis. That if it's a time of passion, with Eibush l'mayla, a time of passion, you get punished not just for doing something wrong, but for not running after tzitzis, not running after a mitzvah saseh. Af she'ein adam b'choyev liknes talach hatal b'tzitzis ve'ed ketu. There's a Gemara. Right, there's a Gemara Masechta Menachos that you're not mechoyev to put tzitzis. If you have daled kamfis, you put tzitzis in. There was one guy who was not the rei defachat tzitzis. He didn't look to dafka have a beggar with daled kamfis. He should be able to put tzitzis in it, and he died. Why did he die? Because it was shas rischa. Similarly, over here, there's so to speak, the idea of shas rischa, the peirik echad, because they achieved critical mass of 24,000 talmid. Okay, questions or comments?
So where the ayin hara come
from a guy named Jack. Yankel. Moishi. You remember Rebbe saying the Sicha?
No.
Huh?
No.
You were in New York at that time?
Yeah.
I don't believe you.
I was there.
Ich glaub dir nicht. Okay. Vihine. Sifhei. Now goes the nigla is finished. Sipur said this story. Oida is Talmid Rabbi Akiva, but Rabbi Akiva's students shemeisu that they died.
Doesn't answer the first shiloh though. Because it was an ayin hara, therefore there was no real reason for it. Okay.
No, that's why it was Peirik Echad.
Right.
It was the Peirik Echad because of the ayin hara. But the Rebbe says the Peirik Echad doesn't only go on ayin hara. It goes on the fact that they achieved the Madrega of Chavtal Delef. And that was getting the ayin hara. Vihine. Sipur said this story, Eide's Talmid Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Akiva's students, Shemeisu that they passed away, that they shalei nogu kavod zelazeh, that they didn't respect one another. Says the Rebbe who chelik b'teira lashon hera, it's a part of the Torah which is a lesson. But achim epneza nifsek edid halacha, therefore is shenegu k'tas avelis b'mei sfira, and sfira we have what's called k'tas avelis. I mentioned to you before, halachically you could pick. It doesn't have to be for 49 days. It could be for 32 days, either from Pesach till Lamed Beis Ba'omer, or from Beis Iyah till Shoshis Me'akbala. That's when you have to have the Avelis of Lag Ba'omer. Umuvum, that's indicative. Even though we're talking about Rabbi Akiva's disciples. They're a great level. Of course, you can add another thing. That's why the Eibush was so particular with them dafke. This is like a third reason. Number one, number two, there was an ayin hara, Peirik Echad. And number three, they were in a very high level, so they were judged with a very, very exact standard. It's Sviva of Nishara Me'ed, like the Gemara. HaKadosh Baruch Hu B'daik B'tadik B'chot HaShayra. Because nevertheless, Huva zed, this is brought. V'nilmum zed, it's learnt. B'teira and the teira. Shekolachad v'echad b'yisrael, that every single Jew, tzarech liyaz b'hashleimos, the avas Yisrael, we must all achieve a shleimus and avas Yisrael. Gam b'mikim, even in such instances, shabitad advarim, that because of various things, yeshna nesinas mokim, there seems to be the possibility, shaleilis nag b'kovid klapi azul, that you feel you can't respect the other guy because he's making a big mistake. B'dugmas hamatzev shel talmidei Rabbi Akiva. So the Rebbe says, I'm not going to talk about the leino and kovid zelas. I'm going to talk about what they call in America, what they call in America, righteous indignation is the word for it. Righteous indignity, right? I'm right. You're wrong. They had reasons to feel that they had a right for the leino kovid zelas. The Rebbe says, "V'yesh leima shezeh koshur gam im hatam." This explains also the second reason. The simchas lag be'emer, the joy of lag be'emer. The Rebbe says there's two reasons why we rejoice on lag be'emer. One of them is the Talmid Rabbi Akiva Poskel Melomos. The second is Rabbi Shimon Yochai passed away. It's Yom Hilula, that Rashbi, the yard side, the Hilula, the day of the Simcha of Rabbi Shimon Yochai. Shuhaya mitamid of Ha'acherim, Rabbi Akiva was in the last Talmid Rabbi Akiva. Shalom ad itam, that he learned them v'achtam u'udah shekol. The Gemara says that after they all died, Rabbi Akiva went to the Dorim. He found 5 chevre, one of them was a Shimon, and he taught them the whole Torah. One of the things which is written beferish in Chazal. Oides and Hagas Rashbi about Rabbi Hanhaga. He hishtadlu say harbe. His great effort. Vayeseda an extra. But Inyan Abbasal. Rabbi Shimon Yochai was very into Abbas Yisrael. Like we find, as soon as he came out of the cave. What did he say? Omar ils ika mills to the boiler to quote. Is there anything in the world that needs to be corrected? And if there's something that needs to be corrected, I'm going to fix it. Omar, like they told him, ika duchta, this be suffix tuma. There's a place where there's a suffix about tuma, v'isle tzara lekahuna la akufi. The kohen who go to the Beis Hamikdash are afraid to go there because there's a suffix tuma, and they walked around it. So the Gemara says, Hishtad l'rashbi tekef v'tikinus. The Rabbi immediately asserted himself, and he found a way to be mat to the area. So we see Rabbi Shimon as the koch navas. But Sipur muflahu. It's very interesting. 13 years he was in a cave. During this entire 13 years, he had the chance to teach anybody Torah except for his son. You would think, when you come out in a cave, the first thing you should have done was last save Talmidim, to gather students, to learn them Torah and to teach them Torah, especially since Torah was his life. Instead of Rabbi Shimon Yochai getting people together to teach them Torah, what did he do? Osak, he engaged Levada to clarify. Ha'im ikam mills the boiler to corner if something needs correction. Not that he heard that something was broken and he went to fix it. He asked, is there anything that needs to be fixed? Ve'ishtadel l'taken, and he made an effort to correct Mokam, a place try b'safek tumash g'ram tzad l'kayanim, a place with a tzad for the kayanim. Claim it. Ha'medubar ha'yirak b'negei l'mitzpah shal kayanim sha'yisricham la'avad derech. A small number of kayanim had to go through that road. Number 2, Gamheim yochel olechas b'derech eretz, they could have gone on a different road. And shahayilem tzad, it was hard for them because they had to make extra steps. So you're talking about a few people who were only inconvenienced in terms of how much they're going to have to walk. And nevertheless, Afal Pikein, Nishtadla Rashbi, Rashbi Yochai made an effort. V'osak, and he engaged. But Atzmei, by himself, B'tikan Adober, and correcting the matter, Levatel Tzar, to break this Tzar, Ad Yedekach, this is the extent to which, Godlo Midas Avas Yisrael Shal Rabbi Shimon Yochai. Rabbi Shimon Yochai's Avasol was so much, he comes out of a cave, he's looking for what to fix, where he can take away even Suffolk tumors that people could walk in, so. In other words, Rabbi Shimon Yochai practiced Avas Yisrael. The same idea that Rabbi Shimon Yochai said, is there anything in the word, this correction is the other Maimon Chazal. Rabbi Shimon Yochai said, I could spare the whole world from judgment. I learned yesterday something. It must have been a Maimon, but I can't remember. Where the Rebbe was b'tzayin to a Gemara, I think in Masechta Sukkah. And I looked it up. In this Gemara, the Gemara says like this. Rabbi Shimon Yochai said, if I am with my son, if I'm by myself, I can protect my whole generation from judgment. If I'm with my son, I can protect my whole generation and all future generations. if I am with my son and another person whose name I don't remember, I can protect myself, the future, and the past generations from din. This was the care of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Shanagosei be'inyan de Avas Yisrael v'achtas Yisrael, his engagement in Avas Yisrael and Achtas Yisrael, Hoi betachas ilu was on the highest levels. Dog he worried. V'haidian he announced. V'hu vazev and ikvateret brought in the Torah forever. Ava v'chiba shalei, the extent of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's Avas Yisrael, laid akle b'nei Yisrael shei bedagas tamid Rabbi Akiva ela gamla elu shesh tzerich lepeitim anadin, not only to people who are the madrega of tamid Rabbi Akiva, even push to people as well. Last night they had a Fabrengen. Yeah, you saw the Fabrengen? Anybody in the Fabrengen? Last night was the Fabrengen. The women organized the Fabrengen. Did any of you see it? I guess that's a negative. There were over 500 computers on. I spoke. And the last speaker was Ber Elazar, from the greatest Shluchim. And Ber Elazar to tell Maisa. There was a Yid in Eretz Yisrael, his name was Rabbi Yankov Peles. There is a Yid in Yisrael. Rabbi Yankov Peles was involved in Askanos, was a Chassidish Yid. And he and some Lubavitcher Askanim had a machlokes. And it became quite personal. But he was right. That he knew that what he had done was what the Rebbe approved. He was in New York. He was a Rebbe of Yechidus. And the Rebbe says, I'm asking you, when you go back to Eretz Yisrael, go to the other Chevre and ask Mechila of them and ask them to forgive you and that you want to be friends. So Rabbi Yankov Peles is standing in the Rebbe's room and he's thinking to himself, the Rebbe knows I'm right. The Rebbe told him he's right. And then the Rebbe says to me, I should be the one to apologize. And it's not that I'm right and they're wrong. We're arguing about what the Rebbe wants. The Rebbe wants what I want. So the Rebbe tells him this, and he doesn't say a word. He's so stunned. The Rebbe tells him he should go and ask Mechila when the Rebbe told him he's right. So when the Rebbe realizes how stunned he is, the Rebbe says to him like this. It was before Shavuot. He says, Itzer is the Zeit von aljen dem jede tachtenim tachtenim yal aljen. That what's above has to come down, what's below has to go up. And I think the Rebbe said also Vani Amaschal. Maybe he says, I'm going to go first. B'meila dav der Elyon gains some tacht. In other words, the Rebbe said to him, you're right, and that's why you have to go and ask Mechila, because you're the Elyon. Ad kedei kach. Anyway, the Rebbe is saying Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai had this kind of a koch in Avos Yisrael. Did any of you hear the story last night or not? Were you there, Mendy?
Negative.
I thought I saw some Empire Stiebel names.
I don't know. There's so many things to go on to, I can't keep up.
There were 535 computers on at one point. It was unbelievable.
More than tonight, you mean? More than this show?
See, our shir has what's called Begilui Ubeseisa. Ubeseisa, we have an infinite number. Begilui, it's more than the Golui rate. Anyway, V'yesh Leimar, Shetalmidoi HaMuvel Rabbi Akiva. Since Rabbi Shimon was the most dedicated, one of the most dedicated to Rabbi Akiva, the Gemara says, Shonu Midoisai. Rabbi Shimon said about himself, Shonu Midoisai. Shemidoisai heim Trumiyais, the Trumiyais tell Midoisai of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Shimon said, learn from my midas. Of course, the Gemara says it actually means halachas. Because my midas is the best of the best of the midas of Rabbi Akiva. So Moser Atzmi V'chol Nafsho Me'ed, he dedicated his life to the point of Mesiras Nefesh, Lahamshich, to bring down Klal Gadol Sherabi HaGadol, the great principle of his great Rebbe. But in the Avos Yisrael, in the aspect of Avos Yisrael, which is the Klal Gadol B'Tein. Says the Rebbe, Tikin Bazeh, Ha'inyan Rabbi Shimon for sure corrected idea of the no Kovaz Bazeh. Ayadei Talmid Rabbi Akiva, Hashem the ultimate Rabbi Akiva, V'eid moreover, V'dasted through his efforts, U'b'terasted through his Torah, Hinchil, Harav, Hareza Av. A Rebbe is like a father. He inherited to all of us. L'kol echad ve'echad m'neisal, to every single Jew, es hakoyach, the strength, l'hagia, l'tachas, ha'shleimus, shel Avos Yisrael, to reach the ultimate Avos Yisrael. Kanal discussed before. The ultimate Avos Yisrael is quite a challenge. And then the Rebbe says the other Mameh Chazal, Kedai hu Rab Shimon. Rab Shimon is worthwhile. Lismech Allah b'shat ha'tchak. When life is difficult, when life isn't good, you can trust Rab Shimon. In the darkness, in the pressure of this dark last Golos. The sea with the Golos in Aschina. Kedai lismech al Rashbi, it's worthwhile to rely on Rashbi. Sheyifted as kol ha'elam kulam and adin, should spare the whole world from judgment. V'yachish should hasten as gula the Geula, the Kol B'nei Yisrael of the Yidden, v'dashchin tishav v'gul tzachim b'galusa, Geula amitis v'ashtay ma'idei Mashiach, that cannot take it from a Yad Mamash. Okay, so the word of the Sicha is Ayin Hara. The word of the Sicha is Ayin Hara. Perikach. Okay, questions or comments? Okay, so if you want to read, so around 11 o'clock, it's going to be a Fabring with the Bachrim. Welcome to join.
I saw I don't know where I saw it, but I saw there was some Rav back in Europe or something where they wanted to hire a chazan that he wasn't so excited about.
No.
So he was fighting his board. And so they sent the Shaiva to one of the, that was a few years ago, one of the Av Bezdin somewhere over there. And he sent back, Yamay, the Russian was, Yamay Pesel Behechal, but don't have Machlaikas.
Wow.
Yeah.
Who was this Gadol Yisrael?
I had to find it. It was
written up last week in one of the papers.
Yeah.
Maybe the dealing for bringing or...
Mendy, what would you do if your name was Have to Find It?
If I what?
If your name was Have to Find It. Forget
Have to find it?
Go to sleep.
It's a little late for him. He's a little tired.
He said Have to Find It. If your name was Have to Find It, that's the Pesel Be'era. Have to Find It. Yeah.
There's another line.
No.
There's another line. It says,
right. Yeah, I heard that once. Chassidim sagen das. A emes is shalom is a falsche emes is the best. And I once repeated. I once repeated this to some Chassidish Yidden, and they got really upset. No, falsche shalom. Okay, shalom.
Yeah, but you know something? Machlekes brings you down. Machlekes gets you the best, and it's just not good.
Unless you enjoy it.
Some people enjoy machlekes. You know,
some people can live without it.
I know, Gizem Chayes. We're simple people.
So we have to have kavod elazeh for the people who love machlekes. We just don't understand their psychology.
No, we don't.
Okay, good night and good Shabbos.
Shabbos.
Yeah.